When a 3-bedroom house sells for less than a compact car, you don't ask questions. You don't wonder why the listing photos look slightly overexposed, or why the previous owner accepted the offer within 6 minutes, or why the realtor kept using the phrase, "unique neighborhood culture," while refusing to elaborate. You sign. Immediately. Preferably before someone corrects the obvious accounting error. That is exactly how I became the proud owner of 14 Alder Creek Drive, a property that featured hardwood floors, new appliances, a surprisingly large backyard, and, though this detail had been suspiciously absent from the paperwork, alien neighbors who did not believe in clothes. I didn't discover that last part until my second morning. The first morning had been blissful. Quiet street. Birds chirping. Coffee tasted better when it wasn't brewed in a cramped apartment kitchen that doubled as a laundry room. I remember thinking, this is it. I'm finally an adult. The second morning began with me stepping outside in my bathrobe to grab the newspaper and immediately locking eyes with a 7-foot-tall lavender humanoid strolling across the adjacent lawn like it was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. For a moment, my brain tried to file what I was seeing under performance art. Then the lavender humanoid waved. Not a shy wave either. A cheerful, full-armed greeting, like we were old friends meeting at a farmer's market. "Good morning, neighboring human," it said in flawless English. I dropped the newspaper. I also considered dropping consciousness. "Good morning," I managed, because apparently my survival instinct defaults to politeness. Up close, the being looked less frightening and more luminescent. Its skin shifted in faint ripples of color, blues blending into pinks like a slow-moving sunset. No visible hair. No visible anything, really. Just smooth, glowing skin and enormous silver eyes full of open curiosity. It tilted its head. "Are your external coverings ceremonial?" it asked, gesturing toward my bathrobe. "Or medical?" I stared at it. Then at myself. Then back at it. "They're normal," I said weakly. A second figure emerged from behind a tree. Slightly shorter. Teal. Also extremely unconcerned with Earth customs. They spoke quietly to each other in musical tones before the teal one nodded. "Fascinating. Humans require environmental wrappers despite temperate conditions. We don't require them," I said automatically. "It's more of a social agreement." Both of them brightened several shades, which I would later learn meant excitement. "A shared illusion," Lavender said. "Not an illusion," I replied. "More like manners." At that exact moment, Mrs. Hernandez from across the street power walked past with her dog, staring straight ahead with the laser focus of someone pretending very hard not to see anything unusual. She did not wave. She did not blink. Her dog, however, tried to. She dragged it along faster. I watched her go, then turned back to the aliens. "You're new," Teal observed. "I just bought the house." They exchanged another musical murmur. "You were not informed?" "Informed about what?" Lavender considered this. "The neighborhood acclimation process appears inconsistent." That should have been my cue to run back inside, list the house immediately, and take whatever financial hit came with fleeing extraterrestrial adjacency. Instead, I thought about my old apartment. The rent increases. The upstairs neighbor who believed 2 a.m. was the ideal time to practice tap dancing. The plumbing that screamed like a haunted kettle. Aliens, I decided, did none of those things. Probably. "Well," I said, drawing my robe tighter out of pure reflex. "Nice to meet you." "We are delighted," Teal said. "We are conducting a long-term cultural immersion." "On my street?" "Yes." "Why here?" Lavender gestured around. "Low population density. High tolerance index. Excellent soil conductivity." I had no idea what that last one meant, but it sounded expensive, which reassured me about property values. Over the next few days, I learned 3 critical facts. First, the previous owner had moved out overnight after what the neighbors diplomatically called an adjustment period. Second, delivery drivers would leave packages at the end of the driveway and accelerate away like action heroes escaping an explosion. Third, The aliens, who introduced themselves as Elwire and Sola, were relentlessly friendly. They asked questions constantly. Why did humans knock before entering homes? Why did we eat plants if we could grow more plants? Why did we apologize when someone else bumped into us? And most frequently, are you certain the coverings are necessary? Despite the surreal circumstances, life settled into something resembling normal. Work remained work. Bills remained bills. And oddly enough, having neighbors who could repair a broken fence by humming at it for 30 seconds turned out to be a major perk. About 3 weeks in, something even more improbable happened. I got a yes. Her name was Mara. We'd been orbiting each other for months at the bookstore where she worked, trading recommendations, sarcastic commentary, and the kind of easy conversation that makes you linger longer than you meant to. She was sharp, observant, and had the unnerving ability to look directly at a person when they spoke, which made lying nearly impossible. Not that I planned to lie. I simply planned to omit certain neighborhood details until absolutely necessary. When I asked if she wanted dinner sometime, she smiled like she'd been expecting the question. "I'd love to," she said. I floated out of that bookstore. For the first time since buying the house, the future felt less like a questionable real estate decision and more like momentum. Naturally, that was the evening Elwire knocked on my door. "I have noticed an increase in your grooming behaviors," they said as I opened it. "Is a significant social convergence approaching?" "I have a date," I admitted. Both Elwire and Sola, who had appeared silently beside them, flared into radiant gradients of gold and coral. "Pair bonding," Sola whispered. "Early stage courtship," Elwire added reverently. Before I could redirect this conversation, Elwire asked, "May we witness the ritual?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Trust me," I said. "There will be nothing to witness." They exchanged a look that I would later recognize as skepticism. "We shall remain respectfully distant," Sola promised. That should have worried me more than it did. Instead, I spent the next day cleaning like a man preparing for a surprise inspection from royalty. Floors vacuumed twice. Candles purchased but not yet lit because I wasn't emotionally ready for that level of implication. Ingredients assembled for a dinner ambitious enough to suggest competence, but not so ambitious it screamed desperation. As the sun set, I adjusted the table for the 5th time and tried to slow my breathing. Finally, something in my life was simple. Normal. Entirely terrestrial. Through the open window drifted Elwire's voice, hushed but clearly audible. "The mating candidate will arrive soon." I froze. Then came a gentle tapping sound from the shared fence. I stepped outside. A small metallic platform had been erected behind a cluster of shrubs. It featured what looked suspiciously like recording equipment. "You built an observation deck?" I asked. "It is discreet," Sola said proudly. It was many things. Discreet was not one of them. The doorbell rang. Elwire leaned slightly over the fence, their skin glowing with scholarly anticipation. "Your heart rate has accelerated," they noted. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and went to answer the door, having completely forgotten the most important rule of hosting a date. Always warn them about the neighbors. I opened the door with what I hoped was a relaxed, charming smile and not the expression of a man living one thin excuse away from total social collapse. Mara stood on the porch holding a small paper bag. "I brought dessert," she said. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I gambled on chocolate being a universal language." "It absolutely is," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. "You may have just saved the evening." She glanced around as she entered, taking in the clean floors, the carefully set table, and the faint smell of garlic and rosemary. "Wow," she said. "Either you're secretly an adult, or you panic cleaned for 6 straight hours." "Little of column A," I admitted. We were halfway to the kitchen when a soft humming noise drifted through the wall we shared with the neighbors. Mara paused. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" I said too quickly. "That electric choir sound." "Oh. That's probably infrastructure." "Infrastructure hums in harmony?" This neighborhood is very committed to quality utilities. She gave me a look that suggested she would be extremely difficult to lie to long term. I made a mental note to survive tonight first and worry about long term later. Dinner started beautifully. Conversation flowed the way it does when two people have already done the preliminary work of liking each other. She told me about the strangest customers at the bookstore. I told her about accidentally sending a company-wide email meant for one person. We laughed easily. For a while, I forgot about the observation deck. Then came the knock. Not on the front door. On the kitchen window. 3 polite taps. I moved with the speed of a man trying to intercept a meteor before impact. When I pulled the curtain aside, Elwire stood outside holding a tablet that glowed soft blue. They waved. Behind them, Sola crouched low, as if this qualified as hiding. I cracked the window an inch. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Maintaining respectful distance," Elwire whispered back. "You are at the window. The glass preserves observational ethics. You promised not to watch. We promise discretion. That platform has railings. Safety is discreet." Before I could form a response, Elwire glanced past me and froze. "The mating candidate is aesthetically symmetrical," they breathed. I shut the curtain. When I turned back, Mara was smiling into her wine glass. "So," she said calmly, "are you going to tell me about the glowing person in your backyard, or should I guess?" There is a moment in every lie where you can still retreat gracefully. I missed it. "You saw that?" "Hard not to. Your infrastructure just waved at me." I exhaled slowly. "Okay. I need you to stay very calm." She leaned forward with visible excitement. "Are your neighbors aliens?" "Yes." "Actual aliens?" "Yes." She sat back, considering this. Then she grinned. "You know what? That explains the property price. You're not running away?" "Please," she said. "Do you know how boring my last date was? He collected antique teaspoons and referred to them as investment metals. Aliens are an upgrade." Relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. Just then, a muffled thump sounded against the wall, followed by a hushed argument in musical tones. Mara raised an eyebrow. "They don't seem very distant. They're studying human behavior," I admitted. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, I would absolutely watch a documentary about us if the roles were reversed. That is not helping me." Before she could reply, the back door handle rattled gently. Then came Elwire's voice. "We have detected elevated laughter levels. Is the ritual progressing successfully?" I closed my eyes. "Do not answer that," I muttered. Mara clapped a hand over her mouth to stop herself from laughing out loud. I opened the door just enough to step outside. "You cannot come in," I told them quietly. "We brought offerings," Sola said, holding up a bowl filled with softly glowing spheres. "What are those?" "Nutrient clusters. They're bioluminescent. They are festive. You can't bring glowing food to a normal dinner." Elwire tilted their head. "Define normal." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Please go home." "We are home," Sola said gently. "Go to your side of home." They hesitated. Then Elwire said, "May we ask one small question?" "No." "Is rhythmic movement required before physical affection?" "No." "Fascinating," Sola whispered, typing something into their tablet. When I returned inside, Mara was openly laughing now, tears bright in her eyes. "I like them," she said. "You're supposed to be alarmed. They're polite. Curious. Slightly intrusive, but honestly? So is my Aunt Linda." We tried to resume dinner, but every few minutes a shadow drifted past the curtains. At one point, a small drone rose slowly into view, hovered, then descended when I pointed at it with silent fury. "They built a research drone?" Mara asked. "Yes." "That's incredible." "It's horrifying." A gentle chime echoed from outside. Elwire's voice followed. "Update. Human courtship appears heavily dependent on humor exchange." Mara lost it again. Something unexpected happened then. Instead of spiraling into embarrassment, I felt the tension snap in the best possible way. The absurdity was too big to fight. So I stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain wide. Lyr, Sola. You can stop pretending you're invisible. They froze mid-note taking. If you're going to observe, I said, you follow human rules. No interruptions. No commentary. And absolutely no drones. They glanced at each other. Then both shifted into a warm amber glow. Your boundary assertion is admirable, Lyr said. Confidence is apparently attractive, Sola added, making another note. Out, I said, pointing next door. They retreated. The yard fell quiet. When I turned back, Mara was watching me with a softness that hadn't been there before. That, she said, was impressive. I was powered entirely by panic. Still counts. We sat down again, closer now without realizing it. You know, she said thoughtfully, most people would have moved. I thought about it. Why didn't you? I considered the question. Because running is expensive. Because curiosity is stronger than fear. Because something about being the one human on the block who didn't bolt felt important. Finally I said, someone has to show them we're not as fragile as we look. Through the wall came a faint, approving hum. Mara smiled. I'm very glad you didn't move. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang again. Slowly, cautiously, I walked over and opened it a crack. On the porch sat the bowl of glowing nutrient clusters with a handwritten note. For energy during extended mating rituals. I sighed. Behind me, Mara burst into helpless laughter. And despite everything, the aliens, the surveillance attempts, the glowing snacks, I realized the night was going better than any perfectly normal evening ever could. By the time we finished laughing about the glowing energy snacks, the evening had shifted into something looser, warmer, and far less fragile than first dates usually are. The kind of tension that makes every pause feel like a test had dissolved somewhere between the second glass of wine and my neighbors attempting to scientifically optimize romance. Mara leaned back in her chair, still smiling. I have to admit, she said, this is the most memorable dinner I've had in years. Memorable is one word for it. I was going to say interplanetary, but memorable works. Outside, the yard had gone suspiciously quiet. No humming. No drifting shadows. No drones rising like curious mechanical jellyfish. It should have reassured me. Instead, it felt like the silence before a poorly supervised experiment. You know, Mara continued, I can't decide what impresses me more, that you didn't immediately move out, or that you somehow negotiated privacy terms with beings who clearly don't understand the concept. I'm improvising, I admitted. Very confidently. But still improvising. She studied me for a moment in that direct way of hers. That takes a certain kind of person. Before I could ask what kind, a soft chime echoed from the hallway. Not from outside. From inside the house. We both turned slowly toward the sound. A faint blue glow seeped under the living room door. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly across the floor. No, I muttered. No, no, no. What is it? Mara asked, halfway between concern and excitement. I think they found a loophole. I stepped into the living room and stopped dead. Lyr stood near the bookshelf, holding their glowing tablet. Sola was examining a framed photo like a museum curator trying to interpret abstract art. Neither of them appeared remotely guilty. How did you get in here? I demanded. The entry barrier was unsecured, Lyr replied. You mean the door? Yes. Humans rely heavily on symbolic boundaries. Mara appeared beside me and, to my astonishment, waved. Hi again. Both aliens brightened dramatically at her presence, their skin blooming into rippling gradients of gold. The mating candidate greets us, Sola said, delighted. Please stop calling her that, I groaned. Lyr glanced between us, then tapped their tablet. Observation: proximity between participants has decreased conversational latency. Mara blinked. Are they timing our pauses? Yes, I said flatly. Apparently, we're a documentary. Instead of being unnerved, she stepped forward with open curiosity. So what exactly are you studying? Elwire answered immediately. Human pair bonding. Your species engages in emotionally volatile selection processes with low predictive stability. That is the least romantic description of dating I've ever heard, Mara said. We do not intend disrespect, Sola added quickly. We are fascinated. You risk distress repeatedly for the possibility of attachment. Mara glanced at me. They're not wrong. I folded my arms. You promise not to interrupt. We are not interrupting, Elwire said. We are integrating. Before I could respond, Sola tilted their head. May we ask a question? No, I said automatically. Why are his pupils expanding when you smile? Mara burst out laughing. Okay, that one stays, she declared. I dragged a hand down my face. This is not happening. But something unexpected followed. The embarrassment I'd braced for never quite landed. Mara wasn't shrinking away or looking for an exit. If anything, she seemed energized by the absurdity. Do you guys ever date? She asked them. We trial cognitive compatibility, Elwire said. Emotional turbulence is considered inefficient. That sounds extremely boring, Mara replied. Sola's colors shifted thoughtfully. That is the human advantage, is it not? You embrace inefficiency. I looked at Mara. She looked back at me. And for a moment, the aliens faded into the background. There was a quiet recognition there, something simple and steady. Then Elwire cleared their throat, which sounded like wind through crystal. We are detecting elevated heart rates again. I pointed toward the door. Out. They hesitated. You are certain? Sola asked. We are approaching what our data suggests is a pivotal bonding interval. Out. This time they obeyed, gliding toward the exit with surprising grace. At the threshold, Elwire paused. Your boundary enforcement demonstrates leadership, they said to me. Then, to Mara, your laughter frequency suggests strong compatibility. The door closed behind them. Silence returned. Real silence. I exhaled slowly. I am so sorry. Don't be, Mara said. Most people hide their weird. You've just outsourced yours to another species. I laughed despite myself. We migrated to the couch, abandoning the formality of the dining table. Somewhere along the way, our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. You handled that well, she said. I felt like I was negotiating with extremely polite spies. You didn't panic. That's rare. I shrugged. They're not dangerous. Just curious. After a pause, she added softly. So are you. The warmth in her voice did something unsettling to my ability to think in complete sentences. Outside, faint shapes moved past the window, but no tapping came, no commentary followed. For once, the aliens were respecting the perimeter. Progress. You know what I realized tonight? Mara said. What? You didn't laugh them off. You didn't get angry. You just adapted. Like it was obvious you could figure it out. I considered that. Maybe humans were good at that, at walking straight into the unknown and deciding it was livable. Through the wall came a barely audible whisper. Conclusion, Elwire murmured. Humans are irrational, Sola replied. A beat passed. Yet compelling. Mara grinned. I think that's the nicest scientific review you're ever going to get. Encouraged by a sudden, reckless courage, I said, would you want to do this again sometime? Preferably with fewer field researchers? She didn't hesitate. Yes. Definitely. Relief spread through me, warm and steady. Just then, a small drone floated briefly past the window, paused, and then retreated the instant I looked at it. Baby steps. Mara watched it go. They're learning. So am I said. She nudged my shoulder lightly. Well, neighbor to aliens guy. I'm glad you invited me. As I walked her to the door later, The porch light cast everything in a soft gold halo. The night felt unusually still, like the entire street was holding its breath. She lingered for a moment. "I was serious earlier," she said. "You handled tonight better than most people handle meeting my parents." High praise. "Get used to it." She smiled, then stepped closer and hugged me, easy, natural, like it had always been the obvious thing to do. Behind the hedge, something shimmered. I didn't even bother looking. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Text me when the observers file their final report. I'm sure it'll be peer-reviewed." She laughed and headed down the walkway. As I closed the door, Lyr's voice drifted softly through the fence. "Addendum: subject has secured a second encounter," Sola replied. "Probability of pair bond formation increasing." I leaned my forehead against the door and smiled. Against all logic, the night hadn't been ruined. It had been ridiculous. Awkward. Completely unprecedented. And somehow, perfect. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the faint, melodic vibration that meant my neighbors were already awake and probably conducting some kind of sunrise analysis. For a few seconds, I lay there replaying the previous night, half convinced I had imagined it. The laughter. The easy conversation. Mara saying yes to seeing me again. Then my phone buzzed. Mara still laughing about the energy clusters. Also, I had a really great time. I smiled so hard my face hurt. Next date will feature 80% fewer scientific observers. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Mara, don't promise what you can't control. Fair. As I stepped into the kitchen, I noticed something sitting neatly on the counter, a small metallic cube about the size of a sugar bowl. It hummed gently, casting soft pulses of light across the tiles. I stared at it. "Nope," I said aloud. A polite knock sounded at the back door. When I opened it, Lyr and Sola stood there glowing a pleasant shade of sky blue. "You left a device in my house. It is a gratitude module," Sola explained. "It's spying on me. It is commemorating success." I folded my arms. "You broken again." "The entry barrier remains symbolically secured," Lyr said. "I locked it." "Yes," Lyr agreed. "Symbolically." I decided not to ask how they kept bypassing my locks. There are some answers that only increase your blood pressure. "What is this thing?" I asked, pointing at the cube. "It records emotional resonance," Sola said proudly. "Last night generated unusually strong readings." "You measured the date?" "We celebrated it." I sighed, but the irritation didn't quite stick. Not when both of them were glowing with unmistakable approval. "You like her?" Lyr added. "That obvious?" "You stood closer to her than required for conversational acoustics." Sola nodded. "Also, you laugh 37% more than baseline." I leaned against the counter. "So what happens now, Professor?" Lyr's colors shifted into a thoughtful violet. "We wish to explain something. You have wondered why this dwelling was priced below market expectation. I assumed it was the interstellar exhibitionists next door." "Partially," Sola admitted. "But the primary factor is historical. They told me then about the first humans assigned to live beside them. How most had fled within days. Some tried to complain to authorities who politely redirected them. A few attempted to ignore the situation until curiosity wore down their patience. Your government encouraged tolerant candidates," Lyr said. "Cultural bridges are statistically valuable. So I'm a bridge now? You are unusually adaptable." I thought back to that first morning, the shock, the urge to run, the choice not to. "Did you know everyone else would leave?" I asked. "We hoped some would stay," Sola said softly. "Understanding requires proximity." Something about that landed deeper than I expected. For all their advanced technology, they were just neighbors trying to figure us out. "Why study love so closely?" I asked. Lyr's glow dimmed slightly, turning contemplative. "Our species bonds through compatibility metrics. Efficient. Stable. Predictable. A pause. But observing humans has revealed an alternative model. Messy chaos? Chosen vulnerability, Sola said. I blinked. That's surprisingly poetic. You continue despite uncertainty, Elwire added. You risk emotional harm without guarantee of reciprocal attachment. This is irrational. But compelling, Sola finished. I couldn't help smiling at that. Later that evening, Mara and I met for a walk along the riverside trail. No formal dinner. No glowing snacks. Just cool air, fading sunlight, and the quiet comfort of picking up where we'd left off. I told my coworker about your neighbors, she said as we strolled. And? She asked if they were single. That tracks. We walked in companionable silence for a while before she nudged my shoulder. So, have they issued their official findings yet? Apparently humans are emotionally reckless. She grinned. We are. A group of cyclists passed, their laughter trailing behind them. The sky shifted toward amber, reflections dancing across the water. You know, I said, when I bought that house, I thought it was just luck. Cheap price, good space. I figured there had to be a catch. And now? Now I think the catch might be the point. She glanced at me, curious. Most people saw the unknown and ran. I continued. But the unknown is where everything new comes from. Friendship. Understanding. I hesitated, then added, maybe even this. Her expression softened in a way that made the world feel briefly quieter. I'm really glad you didn't run, she said. Before I could respond, a faint buzzing drifted down from above. We both looked up. A small drone hovered 20 feet overhead, attempting what could generously be described as stealth. I closed my eyes. Do not react, I muttered. Too late. The drone emitted a cheerful chime, and Elwire's voice projected softly from it. Statistical update. Hand-holding increases pair stability by approximately 62%. Mara laughed so suddenly she had to stop walking. You have got to be kidding me. I'm going to unplug them, I said. Please don't, she replied between laughs. This is incredible. The drone hovered expectantly. Mortified but oddly calm, I looked at her. Well, we wouldn't want to disappoint the research team. She tilted her head, a playful challenge in her eyes, then slipped her hand into mine. Warm. Easy. Right. The drone chimed again and zipped upward, undoubtedly racing home with its groundbreaking discovery. Congratulations, Mara said lightly. You're now part of an interspecies case study. I hope the peer review is kind. We resumed walking, hands still linked, either of us mentioning it like it might vanish if acknowledged too loudly. After a while, she said quietly, last night wasn't just funny. It was nice. You made space for the weird instead of apologizing for it. I spent a lot of my life trying to be normal, I admitted. Turns out normal is overrated. Good, she said. I prefer interesting. When we returned to my street later, the house glowed softly under the porch light. Next door, faint colors shimmered through the windows like slow northern lights. They're watching, aren't they? Mara whispered. Almost definitely. As if on cue, Elwire and Sola appeared near the fence, their skin radiating a gentle, contented gold. We observe progress, Elwire called. No notes, I shouted back. Sola raised their hands reassuringly. Only admiration? Mara squeezed my hand. I like them, she said. Careful. Encourage them and they'll start a newsletter. We lingered at the foot of the porch steps, either quite ready for the night to end. You know, she said thoughtfully, most people think belonging means finding somewhere predictable. I looked at the glowing house next door, then back at her. Maybe belonging is just finding somewhere you're willing to grow. She smiled at that, slow, certain. When she hugged me goodnight, it felt less like the tentative gesture of a first date and more like the beginning of something steady. As I watched her walk away, Elwire spoke softly from the other side of the fence. You were correct, they said. The unknown does make existence larger. I leaned on the railing, looking out at the quiet street. The house had been cheap because most people couldn't live beside what they didn't understand. But understanding, I was learning, starts with staying. Next door, my alien neighbors glowed peacefully, their curiosity no longer unsettling but strangely comforting. And for the first time since I'd signed those suspiciously rushed papers, I realized I wasn't the odd one on the street anymore. I was exactly where I belong. If the neighbors were going to study love, after all, they had picked the right species.